Well, tonight, as he turns 70, we examine his life less ordinary, a life that mirrors Nigeria's own journey, turbulent, unfinished, and still full of possibility, asking what the years have taught him, what the country has learned, and what remains undone. And the political activist, academic, economist, author, and founder and CEO at the Center for Values in Leadership and former presidential candidate, Professor Pat Utomi, joins me now on the line from Enugu. Professor, thank you very much indeed for joining us. You have turned 70. Congratulations and a very happy birthday. But when the applause fades and the anniversaries pass, what truth about Nigeria has life taught you that you wish you had understood much earlier?
Well, thank you so much, Charles. It's such a pleasure and a privilege to be able to join you today. I think that a good way to engage this is to reflect on a conversation I had a few days ago with the Reverend Father George Ehusani. Father Ehusani reminded me of Socrates and was trying to encourage me not to feel bad if what I've preached most of my life has not yet managed to shape Nigeria, and that Nigeria seems to be still so far away from the dreams that we had as young people. He reminded me that Socrates was thought of in such a way that he was encouraged to actually drink poison so he could die. But eventually Western civilization was literally built on his thoughts. And so I'm in some ways supposed to be consoled by the fact that it is possible that after I am gone, Nigeria will become great because of the ideas that I expressed. I thanked him very much, but I still left some hope that I might see improvement in my lifetime in Nigeria. I do believe that Nigeria is a country that was gifted to humanity to redeem the trampled dignity of the black man and to reverse the road to serfdom that has been paved by years of colonial oppression, slavery, and all kinds, but not to take it from a bitter perspective, but rather one that sees tomorrow as greater than yesterday, and that if we focus on being a redeeming generation, we could walk away feeling that we will find a place in immortality for helping our country become the trigger of the redemption of the black man.
Well, that's a very inspiring and very sort of positive thought there. But let me try and get as much as I possibly can out of your life. As I said, it's a life less ordinary, and there's always so much to learn when we have the privilege of speaking with you. I mean, you have spent much of your life arguing that ideas matter in politics. But I mean, looking back, do you think Nigeria listens more to ideas or to power?
No, I think that at a point in the history of our country, people turned away from valuing ideas as they used to. And a number of reasons can be adduced for this. If you go back to read people like Chief Obafemi Awolowo's 30-something, 40-something year olds, they were really profound philosophers. If you listen to creative minds like Fela and Nikolakbo Kuti, this is one of the great philosophers of all time. But some things happened in the course of the evolution of our country. And one of it is what I like to refer to, and people think of it pejoratively, but I don't mean it that way, as the dangerous alchemy of soldiers and oil. Now, what had happened was the class of 66, the young boys in military uniform, took charge of a country. Some of them were remarkably good people. Some of them were just young adventurers. The nature and structure of military rule is that it is centralizing. Whether you argued one thing about the Iran Sea and another thing later, or nature of military is command, centralizing. The nature of what the founders of Nigeria settled for was decentralizing. A federal structure was chosen by the founding fathers. Lancaster was about knocking that out. And then oil suddenly becomes a factor. The soldiers who are centralizing in their nature get all these revenues flowing in through oil, and we created a prebendal culture where you go to get your prebend from the vicar, literally speaking, the way my friend Richard Joseph essentially captures it in metaphorical terms. And so that culture somehow began to emphasize how much of the share you can manage to extract from the system. We created a rent economy, and unfortunately, those less deserving of public life moved into public life, and culture began to be poisoned. The poisoning of culture with me, myself, and I, this consuming narcissism pushed back on thought. And people began to say, my grandma will go chop, and stuff like that. And they missed the fundamental thing about how societies emerge. In the CVL symposium that we had this morning in Enugu, the Nobel laureate in economics, James Robinson, in making remarks about why poverty persists in Nigeria, went back to Peter Ake's very thoughtful 1975 seminal essay on the two publics. Unfortunately, many of the people who moved into power in later years didn't have the discipline to understand people like Peter Ake, or to realize that thought mattered. They thought everything was, ganache, grab, power was everything. Power is not everything. You get power and you can use it to do so much bad, so much not good, so much evil. And in the end, our life is a very short one. And forever you'll be remembered as the person who destroyed possibilities.
But we
and so more thoughtful people will think differently.
Right. We remember you as someone of ideas and someone who tried as much as possible to impress those ideas, ideas of propriety and ideas of rectitude on this country. What has been, and of course you did that at considerable cost. You sometimes, people wouldn't necessarily listen to you. What's your assessment of the personal cost over the years of dissent to you? Have there been friendships lost, doors that closed, and moments of doubt that the public never sees?
Oh, plenty. I tell you one thing about how I survived, if you will. This culture despises truth sayers. And some, no person, if you want to call him that, shows up in some position thanks to a nepotistic system. He's suddenly, let's say, deputy governor of Central Bank or something like that. Totally undeserving, but he's there. And then he looks at this one and says, this one. No, don't let anything happen to anybody associated with that guy. Because he thinks you are somebody who speaks truth to power. Now, all your efforts to build basic material security can be ruined by that. And for me, it was a regular thing. It happened so often. So I had to come up with a formula for surviving. I did not want my children to suffer so much because I chose the path of, I don't know, speaking truth, whatever you choose to call it, rectitude, whatever. So I had to learn to work several times as hard as my peers. And knowing that you could work so hard in this country and not earn because of the culture of impunity, of corruption, of evil taking things over, I devised a way of having jobs, literally jobs on 3 different continents. And so in maybe Europe, kind of noted public speaker or whatever, I get a chance to make a couple of speeches in a year, and that will earn me a couple of $1,000s. Maybe in North America, I'm a fellow in some institute and an adjunct professor somewhere else. So on the balance, if Nigeria freezes me out, I earn enough at least to pay my children's school fees in decent schools. So I managed to give them upper middle class upbringing in spite of how this system tried to prevent my economic interests from, seeing value.
Right.
So yes, there were lots of costs.
I think that's a very good strategy. I mean, I do recall engaging you a number of times when you were away in places like faraway California and so on. That clearly underscores the point that you're making. But of course, your focus always, and that is what I think a lot of people find tremendously admirable, even though you had clearly that pathway to the international world, and you could have left the country and did whatever you wanted to do, your focus still remained on this country. And in that regard, you've described Nigerian democracy as procedural but hollow. Are we electing leaders or merely rotating members of the political elite? Has the language of reform been so abused in Nigeria that citizens no longer actually believe change is real, even when it's attempted?
To be fair, I think that it's not just Nigeria, it's Africa writ large in many ways, but Nigeria is a worst case example, especially because Nigeria could do a lot more good than some of the other countries where these things happen. But Nigeria has been painfully disappointing because of the quality of people who took public positions and got to positions in public life in which self-love exceeded care for the people. And the ultimate reason for public life, which is the pursuit of immortality, seeking to live forever because you sacrificially gave of yourself for the advance of the common good of all. And for me, it was doubly troubling because from a faith perspective, I struggled not to judge people. I recognize things that they do that I don't like, that I don't think is proper, that I think hurts society and the common good. But I try so hard not to be judgmental and call this person evil. And even when they call me all kinds of things, I think that I have an obligation to treat them with charity. So it compounded and complicated my public ways, especially in more recent history, when the most terrible thing that the political class has done to Nigeria is make hate a part of our culture. I mean, people disagreed in all kinds of ways in the past, but this one of typecasting people who are different either from ethnicity or religion or something and hate talk was something I found difficult to deal with at first, but in the end had to take it as part of the challenge of development and recognizing that eventually the price will be paid by all those who do that. But this pollution of political culture with damaging effects, because economic growth cannot take place, be assured of that, if there is so much pulling. As I always go back to Mahathir Mohamad, and it's better for everybody to be inside the house, piecing out than some people to be outside the house pissing in. So when politicians divide people because it gives them a path to grabbing power, they do lasting damage that is, really sad for the country. But my experience is that in spite of all of that, the possibilities for a great Nigeria of leadership emerging that thinks inclusively and focuses on the fact that there is a greater good than the little things people grab for this moment, which they don't even need, and they die and live off.
Well, I'm going to take you up on that because when you say this, I mean, it doesn't look as if, it looks as if from your point of view, yes. I mean, you're sticking with the country and you believe in that sort of brighter future and the possibilities that potentially still exist, and you've kind of stuck with it. But do you worry? Because, you travel abroad, you see lots of Nigerians, who could be making an enormous difference in this country, but are giving that talent and that skill and that capacity to other countries. Do you worry that Nigeria's brightest minds are increasingly choosing exile over engagement in this country? And I wonder what that says about this country's moral climate and whether one should remain optimistic about it as you clearly are.
Well, you see, I try to rationalize many things. When I look at I wrote a piece, an op-ed piece in the Guardian newspapers, I think, many years ago, that was titled "The Generation That Left Town." It was a reaction to my making some comments in some public forum about education in Nigeria and how good it was, and how Eric Ashby, who led the Commission on Higher Education under Balewa, had talked about the quality of higher education in Nigeria being as good as the best in the world. And some Gen Z person in the group said, you people have come again. It was always good in the past and very bad now. If you guys got such a good education, how come you made a mess of the country? And I very nicely said to her, you may be right, but the truth of the matter is that those who got that education have never really governed Nigeria. Somewhere along the line, with the military taking over in 1966, and those who, the best beginning to leave the country and all of that, those people have never really governed Nigeria. But I then rationalize it this way, that what we call brain drain could become brain gain. Because ultimately, if you look at the triumphs of the 20th century, Japan after the Meiji Restoration, and how the Japanese people came to embrace technology, it was the Japanese diaspora, essentially coming from Germany, that stimulated that. If you look at India rising, you look at China rising, and you see a clear role of the diaspora, you begin to think that what Nigeria loses in these talents moving abroad may become Nigeria's gain when those people become the redeeming elements of the Nigerian Renaissance. Because I believe the future of Nigeria will come from its diaspora.
Right. Well, that's very interesting. And I want to take you up on something you mentioned a moment ago when you talked about young people talking about, if you got all that education, why is the country the way it is? So let's attempt to turn the lens forward. I wonder, when young Nigerians look at your generation, and you come across them quite a bit because, you teach, you mentor a lot of people. Do you think they see your generation as mentors or as cautionary tales?
It's a mixed thing. All this celebration of my turning 70 has come not of my plan or anything, but of my mentees and young friends. They are the ones who have taken on this whole process. They are funding all the things that are going on by themselves and all of that. I'm just a freeloader, a free rider, just accompanying to these events and having fun. We've just gone to the third event in Enugu today. I stepped out of a cocktail here, and there's another dinner somewhere. All of these are being organized by young business people who have mentored, So I see some of them who value what has come. Amongst the people I give as my favorite examples, Gbenga Sheson, who has run one of the finest NGOs on this continent, Paradigm Initiative. Gbenga just walked up to me on the stairwell of the Lagos Business School. And for 20 years, I have been with him through his building this extraordinary NGO. You go to Enterprise, I'm speaking to you from the Tennessee Group's hub in Enugu. And this is an organization, developing this centenary city that I have been associated with as chairman since it started, this project and all of that. And these are young people who have done remarkable things, and I've had the privilege of sitting by them while they were doing these things. And I know how generous they are in expressing what they think is the contribution from my generation. Gbenga Sheson's book is just out. I read some of the things he has written in it, and And so you take that from those who just dismiss everybody. Everybody has a right to perspectives. And I think that when a mix of these perspectives come together, you get a true marketplace of ideas that ultimately history will be written from.
Very interesting. And somebody said that a lot of reform-minded young Nigerians today fear that they might repeat some of the mistakes from previous generations. But let me ask you this, as we come closer to the end of this very interesting conversation, if you could rewrite one chapter of Nigeria's post-military history, where would you intervene and why?
Oh, clearly, 1999. I tell a story all the time. I have a good friend, Tommy Davis. H.O. Davis was a very remarkable politician, and he and Zeke were very good friends. They were in two different political parties with clear ideological differences and all of that. They would go out during the day and campaign for their two different parties with different ideas of how to solve society's problems. In the evening, Zeke will drive up, pick up H.O. Davis, they will go and play tennis and have a drink and come back. That does not happen today. And I believe that this is rooted in 1999. When the military was stepping away after Abacha died, they opened the field and were trying to get away very quickly. Groups of my friends got together. So what should we do? We had these concerned professionals. It was a big pushback on military rule. And some people like the late Waziri Mohammed said, we should go forward and get into politics and change the course of our country from the ideas we had been expressing. And others said, look, we came into this as civil society. We don't want to give the impression that we're looking for an excuse for power. Well, those who came with that latter idea were the ones that won out in the debates. I chaired those meetings. I remember Donald Duke saying to me outside of my office in Victoria Island, where these conversations took place, well, that whatever we say, he was going to Cross River and go and organize Cross River and take it over. The truth is that many of those politicians that we hoped would return from the general service orientation they had in the 60s, but for the excesses of competitive communalism, that those would come back. But we did not trust the military. They didn't trust the military was going away, so they didn't come. And all kinds of undesirables moved into the political space. And we've been paying the price since then.
Right.
So I think that this is where things began to go wrong.
Okay, well, thank you for that. We're coming to the end of this chat now. After 70 years of thought, struggle, and hope, do you still believe Nigeria will be fixed by ideas? I mean, you are an ideas man, or only grabbed by the scruff of the neck and shaken into change by crisis, which a lot of people believe in this country?
Well, you know, this thing about ideas, when I turned 30 years ago, there was in one of the newspapers, a piece by a gentleman, I remember it was Orji, you know, and it said man of ideas. That's the first time I thought of myself as a person of ideas. I just thought I was a very practical person who wanted to fix the world. But ideas matter. Ideas actually rule the world. People say to you, na grammar will go chop, that's na theory. There is nothing concrete and practical that did not start from a theory, an understanding of how things relate, phenomenological linkages. And so, if you truly see clearly, you will see that Nigeria has a mission, and that mission is still possible. I look at how many of the Asian tigers turned around. I remind people that in 1965, Lee Kuan Yew, hardly any resource and endowments to show for it as Prime Minister of Singapore, thought that the ejection or the rejection of Singapore by the Malaysian elite and the divorce was the end of Singapore. 30 years later, one generation later, Lee Kuan Yew would write the book From Third World to the First, the Singapore story. Singapore had in one generation built one of the highest qualities of life in human history with no endowments. I do believe in a point that I made in an interview with The Economist in 1996, way back then. It was an interview, I believe, by Richard Dowden. And I said, I wish Nigeria could find a way of bringing its big military generals, its big politicians, buy them an island, give them all the oil resources of Nigeria with one promise that they never enter Nigeria, and that Nigeria will be a better country for it. And The Economist, in its cheeky way of reporting things, said, fair statement.
Right.
I do believe
right.
that the possibilities of Nigeria remain. Now, yes, I do believe the possibilities of Nigeria remain. Nigeria will be a great country. This ringtone for many years on my phone was the song, Nigeria will rise up again. God will heal our land, restore us anew, but Nigeria will rise up again.
Indeed. And on that hopeful note, I want to thank you very much indeed, and to wish you a very happy 70th birthday. And of course, we've taken up a bit of your time, but you should go back to that dinner that's being held for you there in Enugu. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Professor Pat Utomi is a political activist, academic, economist, author and founder and CEO at the Center for Values in Leadership, and former presidential candidate who's marking his 70th birthday, and he was talking to me on the line there from Enugu.